This video is on translation, which I know absolutely nothing about at all. But I'm going to tell a little story about a friend of mine, a neurosurgeon, and myself, and what we went through when we developed the very first Nepalese font ever in Nepal. When I was thinking about my friend the other day, just a couple of days ago, he passed away in a plane crash, unfortunately, probably about 15 years ago now, doing work for the African government, much like he did in Nepal. So occasionally I think about him because he was such a close friend. The German government sent Mike Frank to Nepal to assist the only other neurosurgeon in the country at the time. This was very early in the 1980s. Mike was doing neurosurgery every single day, operating on brains and spines, and because of all the accidents that happen in Nepal, falls, motorcycle accidents, car accidents, and so forth. And he said to me one day how annoying it was that people went into the operating theater. You know, he'd be operating, and he worked in the government hospital, compliments of the German government, and it's the largest hospital in Nepal, and he would be doing operations, and local people would come in, families would come in right into the operating theater. So he said to me, he says, I gotta create a font for my computer so I can type in Nepalese, stay out of the operating theater. I said to Mike, well, why don't you just write it on a sign in Nepalese? I'll help you if you need help, but you can just write it on a sign and put it on the door. But Mike is quite a genius. He worked his way through college in Germany by building by hand, getting the parts and so forth, some of the first modems ever used in the world. That's how he worked his way through college. So Mike never did anything in the simplest way. And he said to me, well, I'm going to develop a font. And then he said to me, you can help me. We'll develop a font for the computer that we can type in Nepalese. So despite the fact that I thought this was a roundabout way of doing things, I said I'd help him. And I said, but I don't know anything about developing a font. And he said, oh, it's really easy. We'll get the program fontographer, and we can draw up all the characters, and I'll program it for Windows. So I said, okay. And we assigned each other different characters, and we would meet once a week. Now, we're drawing characters from scratch. We're not doing any, we basically creating lines and pulling them this way and that to create characters. So we met once a week or so looking at each other's characters. And after about a month went by, Mike said, do you see what's wrong with this? And I said, no, they look really great. And he said, well, let's put them both together, yours and mine together. So we put them together, and I saw what Mike was talking about. Type has a face, and maybe my daughter has beautiful eyes, and maybe her sister does too. But you put those, switch faces with those beautiful eyes, and it doesn't look like it belongs to the right person. That's why they call it typeface. So Mike and I looked at it, and we realized that, yeah, our characters are great. Our Devanagari is looking really good, but they don't look like they belong to the same face. So Mike said to me, listen, you develop the typeface, and I'll take care of the programming for Windows. So long story short, or short story long, however you want to look at it, Mike and I, Mike is so brilliant because he programmed it beautifully for Windows. And we created the very, very first Nepalese font for Windows, and we sold it as Fontasy, a play on the word fontographer, which I used for drawing up the fonts. So we called it Fontasy, and we were selling the little floppy disks. We even sold copies to the, that would wind up in the government use. And we were the very first. So this came to mind the other day, as it might apply to translation work. Because just as Mike noticed that our font, if we did it together like we were doing, it wouldn't go right together. It occurred to me, and I don't know if this is valid or not, but I know that there's many translation groups in the world. And sometimes it's, 10 or 15 people working, like Padmakara group, and this organization here is group. And there's a lot of different groups in the world that are, creating translations. And I thought that I would mention or make a little talk about this, because so far I haven't seen any problems, but maybe it's something to think about for people that are doing translations when there's a lot of people involved, that as far as the translation goes, multiple people go over the translation, but whoever's going to write it out and put all the ideas on paper probably should be the same person. Maybe that's what's going on now, I don't know. But I'm just talking about my experience and in memory of my dear friend, Mike Frank.